Dr. Reddy Sandhuma, past National President Dr. T.U. Sukumaran, today's chief guest Prasad Sir, State Environment Chapter President Dr. Harikumar, Secretary Dr. Norshid, State President Dr. Jayaram Sir, other dignitaries, past State Secretary Dr. Balendran, Vice President Mukesh, Secretary Sajid, senior members Dr. Parvati Madam, Dr. Satish Agarwal, Dr. Saroja Madam, and dear friends. Here we are assembled as a part of World Environmental Day observation. Restoration of ecosystem, that is this year's theme for the world environment. Reimagine, recreate, and restore. This is the theme for this year. As such, this year the host city is Pakistan, and today it is starting of restoration of ecosystem decade, that is 2030. During this COVID season, there are so many implications for the environment observation. Because of the destruction of forest, all the human beings, animals came together in a narrow space. So we are very close together, just like a closed window. That is why this COVID spread, everything is going to happen. But there are some happy news also. There is 85% of reduction in the industrial fuel, vehicle fuel, and the emission of the carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And also E20 notification. Today, our Prime Minister declared E20 notification. That means the emission from the special fuel for the vehicle by 2023. They are given instruction to all the petrochemical companies to prepare a special 20% ethanol and 80% gasoline with a combination, so that it will reduce maximum exist of the carbon monoxide and other poisonous gases to the atmosphere. I'm not going to speak further because here the eminent forest officer, other expert in the field, it is there. So I'll go to my duty and understanding, that is welcome matters. So at the outset, I would like to welcome our chief guest, Dr. D.C. Jayaprasad Sir, is Chief Forest Conservator, Government of Kerala. On behalf of the IAP, on my personal behalf, I welcome you, sir. I welcome our past National President, Dr. T.U. Sukumaran, sir. He was the past National President, also past National President of Environment Group also. On behalf of the IAP and all of you, I welcome Dr. Sukumaran, sir. I welcome Dr. S. Parmesh, sir, again, the founder and also a great environmental specialist from Bangalore, and he's a great teacher, and also he is a main person in the Environment Chapter group. I would like to welcome our dynamic National President, Dr. Ramesh Ajania. He's from Gujarat. I think this year they are doing a wonderful work for the Environment Chapter. I also welcome the past National President, Dr. Satyananda Kamath. Again, he was the National President of the Environment Group also. And also a President-elect, Dr. Ramesh Kumar, yet to join on behalf of the IAP Environment Chapter, and also Thrissur. I welcome Dr. Ramesh Kumar also. I welcome our great President, our Jayaram sir. Lots of activities are going on. Last week also we had some MBFC program. Next year we got research methodology. So many programs are going on under the leadership of Dr. Jayaram sir. I welcome you, sir. I welcome our National Secretary, past Secretary of Kerala, he also momentum after the Secretary of Dr. Balendran. I welcome State President Dr. Harikumar, Dr. Norshid, State Secretary Dr. Johnny, State IAP Secretary.
Sir, you are muted, sir. Anandeshan, sir, you are muted.
I also welcome State Environment Group President Dr. Harikumar and Dr. Norshid, and also State Secretary Dr. Devani Sebastian, and also all the senior members. Also, I would like to welcome two speakers of today. One is principal investigator of today's Dr. Mohammed Kunji, principal scientist from PG for PG division, and also Dr. Elizabeth, associate professor from Thrissur Medical College. And also, I would like to welcome all senior faculty members and other dignitaries and other senior members. Dr. V.K. Palde, Dr. Sarajam, I already mentioned. I once again welcome you all. Now over to Dr. Reddy Shantakumar for her presidential address.
Good evening to all dignitaries and IAP members. Today we celebrate World Environment Day. The theme is to reimagine, recreate and restore. Mahatma Gandhi said, we have enough resources to satisfy our needs, but not enough to satisfy the greed of even one person. Every 3 minutes, our precious land on this earth is being deprived of forest land which can cover a football pitch, and almost 50% of the coral reefs are already gone. And now to add insult to injury has come the PPE kits on the scene with the coronavirus arriving here. So it's our turn to act carefully and help to heal our world. Our meet today is enriched with inauguration by the Principal Chief Conservator of Forests, Government of Kerala, Dr. Jayaprasad, and keynote address by the National Chairperson of the Environment Group, Dr. Ramesh Bajania. All stalwarts of IAP at the central level and state level are here with us. Dr. Anandakeshwan has formally welcomed them, but I have to doubly welcome them on behalf of Thrissur IAP and Kerala IAP Environment Group. Our talks today, we have two talks today. One is on ecosystem restoration, a societal need for sustaining life on Earth by Dr. Mohammed Kunji, Principal Scientist at the Forest Research Institute, PG. So we eagerly await to hear your talk. Last few weeks, we have been only hearing about the scarcity of oxygen, but today we will learn from the A to Z of oxygen therapy by Dr. Elizabeth Joseph, Additional Professor of Anesthesiology at the Government Medical College, Thrissur. A warm welcome to you both. Our next talk, coming next by Thrissur IAP, is one on COVID vaccine. And second, I'm going to tell you only the heading. It is black clouds in the COVIDian sky. You all understood what the topic is? If not, keep guessing. So now, thank you everyone. And I humbly invite Dr. Jayaprasad, the Principal Chief Conservator of Forests, to inaugurate the session. Thank you.
So before that, Dr. Dusi Jayaprasad is a Principal Chief Conservator of Forest, Kerala government, and he had worked in Kerala, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh as a Chief Conservator of Forest, and he had done a lot of studies regarding wildlife sanctuary about Wayanad, and also so many other studies are under his guidance. And he worked in Thrissur also. From his bio that I came to know he worked in Thrissur also. I think now I formally welcome Dr. Jayaprasad sir for his inaugural address.
Thank you very much for your welcome, sir. And today's the most eminent doctors, esteemed personalities, learned scholars. Actually, you are, it's a great privilege to address you people, because Kerala is supposed to be the, God's own country with a lot of, learned intellectuals. And it's really a privilege interacting with you. And fortunately, today is World Environment Day 2021, and we are celebrating. This celebration is not a ritual, but it should get into a practice of each and every individuals. See, our resources are not permanent. you remember, we were taught that, the forest is one of the renewable resources. That's where our initial study itself has went to a faulty study. Perhaps they say that forests can be renewable. That is what we were studied. And today it came to know that, forests also, it's a non-renewable resource. You cannot renew it once it is gone. In evergreen forests, which were there in Kerala, once lost, are the lost forever. So if you look at the scenario, I just brief about 3 issues on this Environmental Day. Its importance and all already Dr. Srijit has already told. And this year, the theme is that ecosystem restoration. And you all know that, Dr. Muhammad Kunnu, very, very senior scientist of KFRI, is going to brief on the particular subject. And also one more eminent scientist also there, he's going to tell you about other aspects. And as an Indian Forest Service officer, I may throw a few aspects of the significance of the Kerala forests. And apart from that, our global commitments and national commitments and the state commitments towards the environment and the commitments subsequently of the globe, nation, and the state. So the global commitment is that you all know that Conference of the Parties, COP. COP had a series of conferences or the summits which are held subsequent to the Paris Stockholm Conference. And this conference mainly aims at reducing the impacts of the climate change. You all know very well that carbon dioxide and other chlorofluorocarbons, which are responsible for the greenhouse effect, and subsequently it is also responsible for the ozone depletion and global warming. Finally, global warming has led to the climate change. Now, all the nations have agreed that, there is a process called climate change which is happening. There are many countries, they have not agreed to it. Under the United Nations framework on the Convention of Climate Change, which is formed in 1994 to stabilize the greenhouse gases emissions and to protect the earth from the threat of the climate change, had now realized that. And not only them, and all the countries have realized it is a fact what we are seeing today. And every year, every country succumbed to the different issues. Like Australia, complete Australia was burnt, the whole forest area, it was burning for 1 month and nobody was there to prevent or stop it. Millions of the endangered species, flora and fauna had burnt completely. And if you look at the America, the Texas the other day had for 2 weeks, 3 weeks continuously, the cold situation there. Now the Saudi Arabia having its own floods where, you can see only the hot temperatures. And you see Kerala also have experienced this sort of disastrous impacts of the climate. Why is it all happening? This is all happening because of the carbon dioxide levels have been increased tremendously in the atmosphere, which is 0.03%, and it is required to have 227 parts per million in the atmosphere, but the current concentration is 410 ppm. It means the globe is not suitable for the survival. Maybe scientists were expecting next 50 years, it will be the most disastrous effects on the globe because of that. Scientists know all these facts. They know. Maybe, perhaps, luckily, unluckily, the pandemic of this corona is also, we don't know whether it has been created deliberately to reduce the global emissions or it is a natural, that we don't know. But however, This is it's a global scheme. It is all things are going on schematically to reduce the global climate change. You can appreciate that what is going on today. And you know, the industrial nations or the industries or the countries like USA, China, developed countries and developing countries, they are not able to compromise with the CO2 levels. They are not able to believe also, they don't want to reduce their own CO2 levels, and they say that development is required for all. We are taking out the coal and burning it, and we are supposed to have 227 per ppm. Now it is 410, which is not, you know, which is unsuitable. The earth has become unsuitable for the survival, and the global temperature also tremendously increasing. Maybe now we can appreciate that corona is going to reduce the global temperature. Corona is going to reduce the pollution. Maybe a sort of stability may be coming, maybe next 1 or 2 years. We don't know the scheme which is been going on. So that is what is there. And now, you know, India is also having a certain commitments. What is the global commitment now? The global commitment is to reduce the CO2 levels at least as on 2015 it has to be reduced. And because of the reduction, there may be 2 degrees of the less temperature can be recorded in the atmosphere. That was the global commitment. Apart from that, we are also having a national commitment. What are the national commitments? Our Honorable Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi sir, in 2019, in the Madrid summit, COP summit, he has already told 4 issues before the international community, stating that number 1, India is going to reduce the pollution, and we will have a carbon credits by 2.5 to 3 billion credits. So it means that we may have to afforest minimum 350 million hectares, and we have to find out these areas from rest of these places, how to afforest all these areas. And also he also promised that, you know, 60% of the resources we have to take from the other resources like solar, wind, etc., resources, so that the burden on the electricity, the burden on the coal, the burden on the other resources can be drastically come down. Apart from that, he also said that, you know, all the further industrial activities should be based on the resources which can improve the afforestation measures in the country. That was our national commitments. What are the commitments for the Kerala? And at the same time, Kerala, you know very well, it is having 11,524 square kilometers of area. Almost 29% of the total area of the Kerala is under the forest cover. And Kerala, you know, we are having complete Western Ghats, and these Western Ghats having so much of biodiversity, so much of precious biodiversity we are having, that is also maybe depleting because of the human interference, and maybe because of the so many biological interferences. So we are not going into that. So what is the Kerala commitments? So the Kerala commitments now is that we are going to afforest Kerala, and also last 5 to 10 years, every year 50 lakh seedlings have been planted. That is not enough. So we have to take more activities, and there is Nagaravanam schemes and also Vidyavanam schemes, institutional planting, roadside planting, and planting within the forests is taking place now. And also forest department is very, very actively going ahead, interacting with the public and the local self-governments also. So, you know that, you know, Kerala Forest Department is also run by Indian forest officers. Then the reputation of the Indian Forest Service in Kerala is one of the cleanest reputation with the greatest transparency in India. One of the best services that we are rendering in Kerala, that we are very proud. from special Indian Forest Service officers. They are all mostly from outside. They're dedicated. They know their job. They know how to take Kerala ahead. Perhaps today also there was an inauguration by Honorable Minister A.K. Sashindran, Forest and Wildlife Minister. He was also reiterating that we can come up with a lot of good activities in future. And today I have suggested in the forum, sir, there are a lot of NGO organizations are there, private communities are there, different groups like the group that you have today. You are very vibrant doctors community. We can all come together, and you are the intelligentsia of the Kerala, and you come up with an ideas. These ideas Kerala Forest Department also ready to take up and make you as a participants in the process of the afforestation of the Kerala. We have to be very proud of our own Kerala, because Kerala is, when the national average forest of Kerala, India is 23%, Kerala is having 29% within the forest. If you take the whole of the scenario, we are having 59 to 90%, 59 to 60% of the whole of the Kerala is under the green cover. This is not I am telling. The survey of India is telling that Kerala has added many of the areas forests, and a lot of mangroves have been added into it. So I don't want to stretch along. I think with this information, I thank the doctors community who have given me this opportunity. And also, you kindly take my number, you kindly interact. We are also, Forest Department also very happy to interact with people like you, and the NGOs also, who are very, very proactive for the environmental issues of the Kerala. So on this World Environment Day, I declare that this program had been inaugurated, and I congratulate each and every one of you for having part of it and for giving me an opportunity to listen my few words. I'm really feel very happy. I acknowledge my thanks to Dr. Srijit Kumar and Kunju Mahamadji, and for all the rest of the doctors. Thank you once again, and you kindly take my number, and you can contact for any suggestions, any future collaborations and developmental activities also. One thing also I want to add, Kerala is only the state we are spending minimum 1 crore rupees every year on the research side. This research is connected to the different community level research, forestry level aspect, and socioeconomic research, and all these aspects have been covered. Suppose any of you have any projects to tell also, you can kindly give us your research proposals. If it is useful to the community, that can also be definitely be implemented in Kerala. Thank you for listening to me once again. And I declare that when World Environment Day program has been organized and inaugurated. Thank you,
Jayaprasad, for that wonderful words and regarding the Kerala forest and other details about the ecosystem and other details. Now we will go for the keynote address, none other than our National President of Environment Child Health Group, Dr. Ramesh Bajania from Ahmedabad. Over to Dr. Ramesh.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to all respected seniors and dear friends. On this World Environment Day, there can't be better theme than this: restoration of ecosystem. First of all, let me congratulate Kerala state team, both IAP as well as ECHG, Dr. Narati Santa Kumar, Dr. Srijit Kumar, Dr. Hari Kumar, Dr. Naushid Ali, our own Dr. Ananta Keshwan, TM, who is Vice President, invited dignitaries, Dr. Jay Prasad sir. I was so impressed with his dedication and with his so simple approach. India needs bureaucrats like this. Dr. Mohammed Kuni, Dr. Elizabeth Joseph, These last 18 months have been very disturbing to all humankind. So our own group activities too got affected. But we have such a dynamic team and very dynamic secretary in form of Dr. Balachandar D. And I'm lucky and blessed to have him as my office bearer. So we assure that we'll catch up with the time wasted. We are lucky that as and when required, we are getting guidance from our mentors, Dr. Parmeshwar, Dr. Sukumaran sir, Dr. Alok sir, Dr. Kamat sir, Dr. Swati Bhave ma'am, Dr. Ramesh ji. Now, because Dr. Ramesh ji is national president, so we look forward to him with more hopes. This is, I'm particularly
The connection problem.
help from the mentors. You can excuse me here, there is electricity failure, so my face might not be visible.
No, we can hear you. We can hear you. Continue.
Yeah. So today I'm not there to deliver any lecture because we have got so many good academicians, so many good experts of the field. I mean, we are blessed that they have devoted their time for us. Now, my another plea would be to increase the membership. And I have conveyed my feelings to all the members that whomsoever we may try to our 100% and we'll take this group to a level of chapter. If a single member adds 5-10 members, then also the task would be easy. So let's all pledge that during our tenure till 2023, we'll make it certainly a full-fledged chapter. Now, the restoration, it can begin, it can be initiated by anybody. It could be an organization, it could be a state, it could be a country, and most importantly, it could be a single individual, because single individual can ignite a chain of positive reactions. Today, I was lucky and privileged that we had planted trees at 3 different places. One was at government hospital, one was at school, and one was at forest department. And I came across all different people from all different these 3 faculties, and I admire forest people. After army, if somebody asks me, then I consider forest people as the most sincere and devoted people in our country. So during this one school function, there was a lady who is now president of our city, and she used to bring her children to me as patients. So we were sitting and having chat. I told her, I mean, in a very normal voice, I appealed her from my straight away from my heart, that God has given you this great opportunity. You will be president of the local body for 5 years. Everybody earns from their post, but God has given you one opportunity to serve the people. So let's pledge that we'll plant 1 lakh tree during your tenure as a president of local municipality. And she was so overjoyed, and she promised me that definitely we'll do. I mean, this was such a small, and I can visualize that even if 10,000 trees come up, then also, I mean, it's a major achievement. Then the second thing which I would like to narrate my personal experience. Few days back, we had gone to a restaurant nearby, and the food was served in plastic plate. Then even sabji, vegetable, it came in plastic bowl. Then I called the owner. He knows me very well, a Muslim guy and very gentleman. I told him that why you are serving me in this thing? You have a staff scarcity also? He said that no, I have full-fledged staff, but due to Corona, we are taking precautions. Then I counseled him that how come Corona be prevented in by serving your food in plastic? He said that I asked him that people are asking for plastic plates. Then he said, no, even people are not asking. But I just thought that we'll serve in plastic. Then I requested him, I explained to him that this is such a big pollution. I mean, you should never indulge into such type of load to the Earth planet. And he so innocently he replied to me that no, sir, we are not doing any pollution related activities. Every night at midnight, we burn all the plastics which is being collected throughout the day. I mean, I was shocked. And then again, I explained him that how, I mean, great pollution it could be. I took promise from him that I'll come after 2 days for dinner and I'll see that you don't use plastic. And fortunately, he discontinued the use of plastic plates. So just a small gesture can change the events. And this local municipality president lady, I requested her that every night I go to my hospital for some emergency and see people burning, especially tea stalls and pan galdas, all people, they are burning plastic plates and plastic cups, etc. So first instance, you should prohibit the use of plastic glasses. And second, even your municipal workers, they are sweeping the streets, they are collecting the garbage and they are burning this thing. So this can be a very serious health hazards, and especially as a pediatrician, being a custodian of pediatric patients and children, I explained her that this can be very dangerous to the growing lungs. Then again, she promised me that we'll definitely seek an action. I requested her that don't take punishment type of hard measures. You just sensitize them so that everybody has a conscience and they will definitely follow. So these are all small things. So as a common man or common people can start this movement. I'm not going into the depth of the nitty-gritties of restoration of ecosystem that I leave to the experts. Again, I thank the organizing committee. I thank Thrissur, IAP. I thank IAP Kerala for conducting such a important program on this very important day of World Environment Day. Thank you very much. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bajania. As you mentioned, we can do all the restoration at a personal level, social level, government level, and at many other aspects we can do it. Now I invite Dr. T. Sumaran, past national president of IAP and also past national president of Respiratory Chapter, past national president of Environment and Child Health Group. Over to Sumar, sir.
Okay. Beloved Chairperson, Dr. Riddhi Sandakumar, President of IAP Thrissur, my beloved friend Dr. Anandakeshwan, he is the Vice President of the Environment Chapter of Indian Academy of Pediatrics, Dr. Jayaraman, State President, Dr. Ramesh Bajania, the National Chairperson of the ECHG Group, Dr. Balajendran, the Secretary, my beloved friends, Dr. Ramesh Sachidananda Kamath, and Dr. Paramesh, and Chief Guest of the Day, Dr. Jay Prasad, the Principal Conservator of Forest Kerala, and beloved friends. It gives me great pleasure and privilege to be here with you to participate in this inaugural function of the World Environmental Day observation by IAP Thrissur and the Environmental Chapter of Indian Academy of Pediatrics. I congratulate the IAP President of Thrissur, Dr. Riddhi Sandakumar, then my beloved friend Dr. Anandakeshwan for organizing this wonderful conference. And also, I was very much pleased with the talk of our chief guest. He has covered almost all problems concerned with the today's theme, the ecosystem restoration. It was a fantastic talk. I congratulate the chief guest of the day for his outstanding performance today. And also, the WHO has recommended that in more than 40% of childhood illnesses, some form of environmental factors will be there. So in all children presenting with a medical problem or surgical problem, as pediatricians, you must take a detailed environmental history, very important. You must take a detailed environmental history and try to pick up the environmental trigger factors for the disease. For example, those children presented with a recurrent respiratory infection, recurrent fevers, recurrent otitis media, Then allergic disorders, asthma, allergic rhinitis, etc. There should be some trigger factors are there. Some environmental factors will be there. You have to pick up this trigger factors. Our chief guest was also talking about the global warming. It is going to be a real problem for us. Global warming can lead to climate change, and this climate change can lead to the beginning of a number of newer diseases, newer waterborne diseases, newer airborne diseases, new viral infections. Even though we are in the midst of this COVID-19, there are some positive impacts and negative impact following this lockdown now. Following the lockdown last year, we have seen that the air quality index has come down, the air pollution has come down. We have seen pictures in the WhatsApp group that you can see Himalayas very clearly from Jalandhar. If you look from Jalandhar, you can see the Himalayas very well. And water quality has increased, and the water in the rivers has become very, very clean now. This is a positive impact of this lockdown, but you cannot continue with the lockdown. But now the negative impact is that we have biomedical waste is increasing now because of the use of mask, then gloves and PPE kits. I think there's an increase in the biomedical waste, and there will be proper methods to dispose of this biomedical waste also. And with great pleasure and privilege, I wish all the best for this CME program. And I also once again congratulate my friends Dr. Diti Santakumar and Dr. Anandakeswan for inviting me and giving this opportunity to talk to you. Thank you. IAP, Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for the valuable advice. And also now we'll start. We are many medical college staff, faculty members are there. Now we'll include environment history also before the history taking will include it. And now next we'll go to our another past present of environment and child health, the great environment specialist Dr. H. Parmesh from Bangalore. Over to Dr. Parmesh.
So, Dr. Anandakeswan, it's an honor for me. I just want to listen to what's going on. I'm here to learn. And you made me to say that one. I think I really congratulate and thank the Kerala chapter IAP and Kottayam chapter. And I'm in the Thrissur chapter and also the environmental chapter of Kerala for having organized this program. Experts already spoken. And I congratulate, thank you once again. And let's, through the deliberation, we'll learn more how best we can able to contribute, decrease the global warming and environmental pollution, and how best we can rectify ourselves, the damage what you have already been created. I think over to you. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. I wish all the best for the deliberations.
Thank you, sir. Now I invited Dr. Jairam, sir, the State President of IAP. Over to Jairam, sir. Jairam, sir. Dr. Jayaraman, he was there. Now I invited Dr. Balendran, National Secretary of Environment and Child Health, the past Secretary of IAP Kerala.
Thank you, sir. Respected President of IAP Thrissur, Dr. Reddy, our seniors, Paramesh sir, Sukumaran sir, our state leaders, Jayaraman sir and Johnny Sebastian, Anandakeswan sir, our environmental chapter leaders, state leaders, Hari and Naushid, our state, our national chairperson, Bajania sir, and all zonal EB members, Dr. Nisha, Associate Editor, and Dr. Srijit, our Secretary Thrissur, and all my seniors and friends. First of all, let me congratulate IAP Thrissur not only for organizing this meeting with very important guests and very relevant topics, but also for the enthusiasm shown to be a member of our environment and child health group. I can proudly say that Thrissur has the maximum members, around 20 out of 100 members of IAP Kerala, and around 90, almost 25%, and almost 8 members has joined this month itself, including all the seniors, including the president of IAP Thrissur. And from the photos of Thrissur IAPians, I can understand that the interest and enthusiasm you have shown, you are all true environmental lovers. and Antakesh sir and Nisha as the office bearers. There are two office bearers from IAP Thrissur, and I should thank Nisha for bringing out the idea of Green Kerala Challenge. As our chief guest has said, we are doing a lot of participation in planting saplings in our homes, but that should be maintained. So this is why our ECHG has kept this as a contest, and next year, the same day, we will declare the winners who maintain it well, and also should post the progress of the saplings planted today. So today we are our lot of members from Kasaragod to Trivandrum has planted many saplings. So we'll see next year. So I'm not taking much of your time. I want to say only one thing, that the environment determines the child's future. And ideally, there should be one tree for 4 members in a house in their compound for generating oxygen. This is told by our respected Permissive sir in one of the meetings. I am just quoting that only. Let us be all self-sufficient and we save the trees. That is the best gift you can give to your generation next, and also for the greener environment. On the occasion of the World Environment Day, let us all promise to make it a better place to live. Thank you. Jai Hind, Jai IAP.
Thank you, Dr. Bhagandan. The WhatsApp group is filled with the planting of saplings all over Kerala in all IAP branches. Thank you for the encouraging activity by IAP Kerala group. Now I invited State Secretary Dr. Johnny Sebastian to offer the felicitation.
A very good evening to all. Respected Chair, Dr. Reddy Madam, IAP Kerala President and my leader, Jayaraman Sir, President-elect CAAP, Ramesh Kumar Sir, past National President Sukumaran Sir and Kamath Sir, the Doyen of ECH Group at CIAP, Paramesh Sir, President of ECH Group, CIAP, Dr. Ramesh Bajania Sir, Ananda Keshwan Sir, National Vice President of ECH Group, the vibrant and dynamic Secretary of ECH Group at CIAP, Bala Sir, office bearers of the very active ECH Group of IAP Kerala, and my friend Dr. Harikumar and Dr. Naushid, esteemed speakers of the day, Secretary of IAP Thrissur, Dr. Srijit, seniors, and my dear colleagues. I'm extremely delighted to see IAP Thrissur along with ECH Group of IAP Kerala organizing this webinar on ecosystem restoration, the theme for World Environment Day this year. These days, we have been learning like never before. The only positive thing happening due to this pandemic, which have affected all of us in one way or the other. And I feel it's time for us to take an initiative to restore the ecosystem for a better future. I wish this CME all success. Thank you. Jai Hind, Jai IAP. Thank you.
Dr. Johnny Sebastian. Now invite Dr. Harikumar, State President of Environment and Child Health Group. We are running short of time, so I request to be brief. Over to Dr. Harikumar. Unmute Harikumar.
Hari, you are muted.
Unmute. Unmute. Unmute, Hari.
Respected Reddy Madam, President of Thrissur branch, and all other dignitaries on the platform, respected Antakesh sir and all other leaders of Thrissur IAP. I personally and on behalf of ECH Group of Kerala, at the outset, let me congratulate you for organizing such a wonderful program. And we all know that and wish you all a happy Environment Day. And we all know that every year we religiously plant a lot of saplings, and we jokingly or we laugh at each other for if all these plants grow up. India, our state will be an extended forest. But though it is not going to happen in reality, but still that conveys a message to the public that how important is our and how important is environment and how much we owe to our environment. So we are in scarcity of due to scarcity of time, and we are running short of time. let me taking this opportunity, let me request all our IAPNs to please enroll as members of our group, because we want to make this such a chapter of IAP. So I request on behalf of Kerala ECHG to please enroll as members of this group, and let us all work together for the betterment of our environment and other. So I once again thank all dignitaries and our teachers and seniors, Kumarik sir, Sachi sir, Paramesh sir, Jairam sir, our President-elect Ramesh, who is all there, all for participating in this program and making this program a huge success. Thank you.
So now you request our State National Secretary Dr. Bhalandran to conduct a competition of photos of planted this year. Because he's only so many competition and the video competition also, Alpines planning, anything like that. So I want next year we conduct those plan. This year whatever plant we have planted, that we will show next year. Hari, it is okay? Okay, now I invite Dr. Rashid to felicitate the occasion. He is the State Secretary of ECHG.
Thank you, sir. Respected Anand Keshavan sir, Jayaprasad sir, Ramesh Bajania sir, and T.U. Sukumaran sir, and Dr. Paramesh sir, Dr. Ramesh Kumar sir, Sachi sir, and Dr. Jayaraman sir, Joni sir, and dear Bala sir and Harikumar sir, and all IAP leaders. Good evening, everyone. First of all, let me congratulate Dr. Radish Chandakumar, President IAP Thrissur, and Dr. Srijit Kumar, IAP Secretary IAP Thrissur, and IAP Kerala for organizing this program. And I thank you for giving me an opportunity to felicitate. It's nice to see that most of the IAP branches are involved in arranging and organizing the program related to this environmental day. I hope all of you have seen our just a minute videos related to environment. IAP Kerala ECHG is planning on more program related to environment conserving. Environment is vital for a healthy life, so it's very important to encourage everyone to keep their surrounding safe and clean, so that we have a cleaner, a greener, and more prosperous future. So I wish again IAP Thrissur for the success of the program. Thank you all.
I invited Dr. Srijit Kumar, the Secretary, to propose the vote of thanks.
Okay, sir. So we are running short of time, so I will make it ultra short. So I will especially thank our chief guest of the day, Dr. Sri J. Prasad sir, the IFS, the Chief Principal Conservator of Forests, for accepting our invitation and inaugurating this function. We learned, we have heard your speech very well, and we will surely get back to you, sir. Thank you for your speech and words of wisdom. And coming to the IAP family, we have a galaxy of senior academicians in this today's inaugural function. We have T.U. Sukumaran sir, and we have ECH Group President Ramesh Benjaria sir, and H. Paramesh sir, and also the Secretary of ECH Group, Dr. Balachandra sir, and State Office Bearers, Johnny sir, Jairam sir, and Hari sir, and Naushid. And also my President, Dr. Radish Chandakumar sir, and Vice President Anand Keshavan sir. And I also thank the speakers today, and the moderator for today, Dr. Anand Keshavan sir, and Mohammed Unji sir, and Elizabeth Madam. And over to Anand Keshavan sir for to moderate the session and to start the CME. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The inaugural program is over. Now we'll go to scientific program. Today we selected two important topics. One is related to ecosystem. Second is related to oxygen therapy. Oxygen therapy in the sense that during this COVID season, it's really a great news in the newspaper everywhere, oxygen therapy. So first we'll have ecosystem restoration and a societal need for sustaining life on Earth. We have an eminent speaker, a sincere person. As we already mentioned, all forest officers are very, very sincere. Dr. Mohammed Gunji is also a wonderful worker. He is a principal scientist and a program coordinator and extension and training division of Kerala Forest Research Institute, PG. So over to Dr. Mohammed Gunji. Gunji sir, I have to change the slide or you'll change?
Yeah, you can proceed.
Can you share? Am I audible? Am I audible?
Audible. Yeah. Proceed now.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go now.
Okay, thank you. Respected President of this webinar, Dr. Reddy Shantakumar, D. Jayaprasad Sir, IFS, Principal Chief Conservator of Forest, was inaugurated this session, and my friend and IAP National Vice President, Dr. Ananda Keshavan, and office bearers of IAP Thrissur and IAP Kerala Environmental and Child Health Group, Thrissur. Thank you for inviting me to handle a technical session on this wonderful day, World Environment Day. As you are aware, this World Environment Day started, there was a discussion on Stockholm Conference in 1972, where, all the world leaders were assembled. And simultaneously, in 1974, we have started this this World Environment Day by UN, and each year we have a Environment Day on June 5th. So it was the whole world is very much concerned about the dwindling situation in on environment, and it was interesting to remember that in 1974 the theme was Earth is the only one of its kind, only one Earth, because we are talking about the situation of concern about the environment. Now in 2021 we are talking about that Earth means it's already out of it's a lost its balance. So the theme of today's program is, as you are aware, it is ecosystem restoration. So all our ecosystem, whether it is a aquatic ecosystem or it is a terrestrial ecosystem, it is all becoming losing its balance and becoming degrading. So now all of us are thinking about how best we can restore it. So it's a globally most of the conservationists are discussing on the methods we can adopt to restore or rejuvenate the earth and balance the ecosystem. Now we are discussing details about ecosystem restoration, and we are bringing it into a specific framework. It is our social need to sustain the life on Earth. So, as you are aware, ecosystem restoration is nothing but it's a recovery of the wounded Earth, and the systems can restore to its living condition. So it is a pathway for rejuvenating the ecosystem for its environmental services and social needs. Second slide. Second slide. Dr. Adit, can you? Hello. I think the slide is not moving. Huh? Hello. Yeah, I'll go to the second slide. I don't know whether you can change. Okay, thank you. Now it is coming to the restoration details. It is it's an ecological engineering. It involves the assembling of ecological communities, and we can restore any environment to its living situation, where we can have a forestation, or we can have to restore its degradation within a short span of time. Now coming to the history, it's emerged in 20th century, and It is coined by John Eber, William Jordan University of Pittsburgh. However, Larry Oppo have been practicing ecological restoration or management for thousands of years. And let us briefly talk about the ecosystem. You know, ecosystem can be broadly classified into aquatic ecosystem, and then the second one is terrestrial ecosystem. The ecosystem is having a living organism, and there is a biotic community, and there is an abiotic factors also, and it ranges from microorganism to even in a small aquarium to a large area of like forest or in a marine ecosystem. And as you are aware, there are a lot of destructive effort to its landscape, and the impact is very high. And because it affects the ecological process, and maybe it go to the food web, nutrient cycling, and ultimately it affect the whole life on Earth, lead to loss of biodiversity and irreparable damage to the Earth. When we talk about the degraded ecosystem, then any ecosystem is under threat as a result of natural man-made. It's termed as a degraded ecosystem, where in a degraded ecosystem we cannot plant the saplings, or maybe you cannot store the water, and the watershed will be all disrupted. So we have to bring the degraded ecosystem to a living situation, and we have to restore. That is the theme of today. And as you are aware, there are a lot of agents which cause degradation, and that is firstly on climate change, and there are pollutions, there are unsustainable fishing, then there are impacts like in sea eutrophication, that enrichment of the nutrients, then development of coastal places. In natural calamities, we have a lot of volcanic earthquakes, flooding. These are all natural. Besides impact on man-made things, we have a natural also. Then there is an human impact on ecosystem, where firstly comes as rapid pollution of growth, and then deforestation, degradation, then fragmentation of loss of habitat, then low crop genetic diversity, environmental pollution, climate change, nuclear power, and so on. And again, coming to the aquatic ecosystem, we have all rivers, floodplains are among the most complex and diverse ecosystem. And maybe rivers, it is a chaotic system where it is closed. Once the flow is stopped, then that become a degraded system. Then we have to restore it. So a lot of tourism activities, and then pollution, and all are affecting our aquatic ecosystem. Coming to the restoration of aquatic system, we have to do control of pollution. Then there should be a policy for environmental conservation. We need controlled fishing. We need education to the society. Then aggressive coastal development we have to restrict, limiting land conversion drive, using designated routes only to during shipping. Now, what is the solution? The first solution is for restoration is bioremediation. We have to do technically bioremediation refers to the process of using microorganisms to remove the environmental pollutants to prevent pollution. And it is internationally standardized ways are there too for bioremediation, and this organic waste which are dumping into the can be cleaned by microbes. Other bioremediation are bio-treatment, bio-recommendation, and finally to bio-restoration. Now, there is a lot of bioremediation measures, and it is widely employed all over the world. And there is a wherever there is a degradation, we can do technically we can interfere in the process, and we can convert it into a full-fledged functioning ecosystem. Next slide. There are models which you can also can go for restoring. And coming to the terrestrial ecosystem, we have, next slide. We have a green infrastructure. Earlier we were talking about we are planting a lot of trees to restore the earth, but we need a green protocol. So we can have different approaches, and we need a land planners, managers and it can be a landscape approach. So that approach can be used for urban landscape, which has a mosaic opportunity, but at the same time, a stratification of interest, blockages and corpus. So it's a very continuous process, and maybe you can manage the restoration also through urban forestry, urban agriculture, horticulture, aquaculture, gardening, landscaping, bioengineering, biofiltration, phytoremediation. Effective management of urban landscapes depends on the condition performance of all these multiple components. And there are very big scope for ecosystem restoration in terrestrial ecosystem. And it's a dynamic component of the urban habitat. And maybe there are based on the area, maybe we can develop play parks, still larger areas, lake parks, and then biodiversity parks or butterfly garden. Maybe we can have a biodiversity conservation promotion of public awareness for environmental conservation. Now talk about small interventions for greening. We can go for a butterfly garden in terrestrial ecosystem. There we have to have a restoration program like appropriate host plants, appropriate habitats, then appropriate microclimatic conditions. It is available. You can go for that green space development. And we know many host plants like Ixora, Lendana, Ticoma, all these are all uh, butterflies needs as host plants for this nectar, for their breeding, or feeding. And then we need plants like the Orwell large plants, host plants, and these are all common plants. We can very easily develop even our kitchen gardens, small butterfly garden. Then there should be an habitat also. Then there should be a temperature variation. Then we need a good sunshine, shade, bushes, stream ponds. Then the trees for breeding. So then we need some modification also to make it as a landscape. Now this butterfly garden can use for educating the public and for taking them to the society. So our educational institutions can have this green landscape. Another restoration program can be there to sacred goods. Earlier it was there in our homesteads, but now these are all under, and we need a restoration program for sacred groves. So sacred groves are giving a lot of environmental services, and it is the center of traditional, socio-cultural, and eco-folklore. So it's a biodiversity area where you can have a. Then coming to the medicinal plants, we can have a very good. We can have a next slide. We can have a very good. I think we have talked about sacred groves also. Next slide. Coming to the herbal garden, where we have a we are using herbs, plants for different system of medicine, Ayurveda, then folk medicine, Siddha, Unani, Tibetan, Homeo, and then even allopathy. We have a lot of plants are using, and we can think about restoration through medicinal plants, through landscape approach. Here also, we are very much needed this medicinal plant resources for our industrial purpose, pharmaceutical purpose, and especially for immunity development and drug formulation. So in medicinal plant sector, we have almost 6,500 species are almost using for this various industrial and pharmaceutical uses. And even locally, we are using the medicinal plants, and we are exporting a huge amount of medicinal plants. Now we can think about restoration program, and it needs a suitable site, and we have to identify the agencies. We need a capacity building. We need a criteria for according to the agroclimatic. We have to shortlist the tentative items, then prioritize the species, then propagation techniques we have to standardize. We need a fund and action plan. We need stakeholders for awareness. Then we have to associate with the town planning, landscaping, horticulture, forestry, for restoration program. So that way, we can even develop in a large scale. We talked about butterfly garden. We talked about medicinal garden. We talked about sector group. Then even we can have a large area for restoration. Then we can develop it to the biodiversity park. It is also interesting to have a big park where people, even villages or even in a large area, they can program. They can also have a ecosystem service. So in that way, many Western countries, big biodiversity parks are working. And we have this biodiversity park will promote the ecotourism, create livelihood for local communities, and it can also improve the ecosystem process. We can also have a adaptation tendency to climate change, can preserve the rare, endemic, and threatened plants and animal species of the area. So in that way, we can go for restoration, and then in our degraded ecosystem, then it will benefit to improve the potential native species and re-establish, protect the erosion and surface runoff of our topsoil. Wildlife habitat can be improved. Native species and biodiversity can be improved. So soil productivity can be improved and can make it stable, improve the environmental ecosystem. So in that way, we can go for restoration, and just having a lot of, and now the question is how you can support the. There are a lot of agencies who are supporting globally and nationally and locally for our system. Only thing is we have to change our mindset. We should not be a greedy community, and then again our resources are valuable. It is not for us alone, is for our next generation. We have to preserve it. And this day, Environment Day, we have to change our mindset and go for a restoration program to save our earth and to sustain our life on earth. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the chance, and I hope I have covered the restoration ecosystem restoration in nutshell.
Any questions there, Dr. Punjisa? As you mentioned, it should be come from the personal, individual level, but there are so many rules and regulations there, and still our deforestation and even the lands, means cultivation lands are turning to big. In Thrissur, I know 6 or 7 buildings were stopped because they are built on a Padanagatal. You can see that one. So even though this role is there, but it's not effectively used. So how can we tackle that one also? Because in Western countries to an extent, even there is a damage to arms and force, I agree. But in European countries, I think little bit it is preserved. So first I invite answer from Mohammed Kunji sir, and then Parmesh sir, what they have done in Bangalore. Kunji sir.
Yeah, rules are environmental law is very strict, but people should have changed their mindset. First of all, we talk about the wetlands or the mangrove ecosystem, where all encroachment is there. People are filling it and making it to paddy field or wetlands are not for making houses or buildings. It's a ecosystem where the water can be stored. It's one of the best recharging agents. And coming to the Western Ghats, these are all full of quarries, then resorts, then now even organic farming. Forest is our head part, so it is having a very big environmental service. So even if we have a environmental law and we are enforcing it, people should change their mindset and they should not go for over exploitation, and they should behave as a conservationist. Then only earth can sustain, and then then the then we can preserve our valuable natural resources.
So in this garden city is Bangalore. To an extent, I think Bangalore is preserved the ecosystem to an extent. I think because we can see full of trees and other things. So now I invite Dr. Parmesh sir, the man behind the environment action in Bangalore.
Professor Anand, while I did appreciate Mohammed Kuni's talk, as a matter of fact, he covered it, how we can restore the government level, national level, what we can do. Individually, what we can do, we were not covered, as a matter of fact. Second thing, Bangalore, we had 10 trees per person when was started 500 years ago. Now we got 1 tree for 10 people, as a matter of fact. They degraded, as a matter of fact, and a lot of people, Kempegowda, who built the city, he put the towers. We are overruled about the rapid urbanization. In rapid urbanization, what you do it, we have to teach those things. Number one is green space is very much needed. Politicians, policymakers, they wanted how much, what we can do, anything like this. Small space also, you have a green space. It definitely helps, anything like that. Especially the handicapped children, they love so much greenery and all this thing. Unbelievable. The way they've been protected when compared to other people, they enjoy. Unbelievable. We have to have that green space. Parks has to be maintained, as a matter of fact. Each animal needs each space. Human need about nearly 9 square meter area. Cow needs about 9 square meter area. Buffalo needs about, bulls need about 24 square meter per area. Each space we have to maintain. In olden days, in villages, our Maharaja of Nadu, Krishnaraja Vadir, he pay for every cow in that village, how much space is needed for 9 square meter per cow is given as a gomala. Gomala means land for grazing. That is the lung space for the human being also. That has to be bring back as a traditional values, what you've been doing, that one. And maintaining these studies has been done in UK. Many people think, what can maintaining a power, where is the place that's living in, how can it able to help your health? If you spend 1 rupee, you earn from that one for the health related issue, 34 rupees. This study has been done in Sheffield and all this thing. Recently it has come there. So 1 rupee you spend for maintaining greeneries in the park in the city, you earn about 34 rupees per year. With these things, I like to thank you very much. Let's get growing. Rapid urbanization unavoidable, but we have to maintain the whole thing. Mohammed Kuni's talk, I really appreciate. Individually, we have to contribute itself, as a matter of fact.
Thank you, Kunji sir, for the great talk. And also, I would like to thank Dr. Parmesh sir also. Now we are going to another important topic. So the maximum suffering is about the oxygen, means decreased oxygen level and increased carbon dioxide monoxide. And also in this COVID season, COVID era, we know about the oxygen scarcity, everything. To talk about oxygen therapy, it is a medical topic rather than an environment topic. I met Dr. Elizabeth Joseph. She is an additional professor of anesthesiology, a great teacher, and she had so many papers in her credit. And her husband, my friend, Dr. Sibu, is head of the Department of Cardiology also. Over to Elizabeth, madam. Sorry for 15 minutes delay in talk. Anyway, we'll hear you. Over to Elizabeth, ma'am.
Thank you very much, sir, for this opportunity. It is a pleasure to be part of this World
Madam,
Environment Day celebrations. Thank you very much, sir, for this opportunity. Can you hear now, sir?
Yeah. Just fine.
Okay, Kavo, is it better? Yeah, thank you very much, sir, for this opportunity to be part of your World Environment Day celebrations. I'll just share my screen. Can you see my screen, sir? Is my screen visible?
No, it is not visible.
Madam, can you share once again? You
Yeah,
switch off and again restart because I think previously I not fully switch off.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. But I can go with the full screen view, madam. Yeah. I can start.
Yeah. Can you see now, sir? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll just go straight away to the topic as we are very short of time now. Oxygen therapy, as you will know, is used to treat hypoxemia. Am I audible, sir? Is my,
Yeah. Audible very clear. Don't make hurry because we have enough time. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay, sir. As we all know, oxygen therapy is used to treat hypoxemia, and it's actually even though it was previously thought of as a very cheap, widely available drug, over the past few months, we have realized how precious oxygen is. So it's really not a benign therapy, and the risk, cost, benefits of oxygen therapy should be considered just like any other drug. And the therapy should be titrated to a measured endpoint so that you avoid excessive as well as inadequate dosing. So we have come a very long way from the initial device which was created in 1934 by Julius Hess, which was this device. And now we have a wide variety of devices like simple nasal prongs, which are inexpensive, to much more complex heated humidified therapies and ventilators. So when do we start oxygen therapy? Yeah, earlier it was thought that clinical observation was enough, but we have seen that even the best clinical observation by just looking at the signs and symptoms, the regularity of respiration, work of breathing, you may sometimes miss hypoxemia, or sometimes you may misdiagnose hypoxemia. So now, as we all know, the gold standard for knowing the oxygen saturation is a pulse oximeter, which is a pretty robust equipment, and the prices have very low now. So it is easily available, and we rely a lot on the pulse oximetry rather than on clinical observation alone to detect hypoxemia. And of course, the gold standard is the ABG, which is not that easily available, and it is more difficult, of course, to do in children. But with the ABG, you will be able to know the ventilation, the perfusion, as well as the oxygenation of the patient. So when we plan oxygen therapy, you should have a goal. The goal should be to achieve adequate oxygenation of the patient using the lowest fraction of delivered oxygen, because we all know that oxygen is a drug. It is not as easily available as we thought it was. It is a very precious drug. So your goal should be to achieve adequate oxygenation using the lowest fraction of delivered oxygen. And the oxygen delivery device and the flow that you use should be targeted to meet the specific physiological needs of the patient and the therapeutic goals for each particular patient. So generally, we take a PaO2 of less than 60 millimeters of mercury as a criteria to start oxygen therapy. But we can see that a PaO2 of 60 millimeters of mercury and 80 millimeters of mercury corresponds to a saturation of approximately 90 and 95. So with a large difference in partial pressure, you can see such a small difference in the oxygen saturation. So that is because if you look at this oxygen, yeah, okay. Yeah. So if you look at the oxygen dissociation curve, the sigmoid curve, you can see that at high oxygen pressures, relatively large changes in the pressure leads only to a small change in the oxygen saturation. If you look at the top part of the curve, that's a relatively flat curve. Where you look at as the saturation falls below 90 degrees, you can see that even a small reduction in the saturation causes a large fall in the PaO2. So there is a gross difference in your PaO2 as well as the saturation. So we generally take the PaO2 for starting oxygen therapy as 60 millimeters of mercury, which roughly corresponds to about 90, a saturation of 90%. But as we all know, it is not the oxygenation, the oxygen delivery in the blood is not dependent, because that just measures the amount of oxygen that is dissolved in the blood. So there are a lot of other ways that, I mean, oxygen is also transported with by hemoglobin. And so the delivery depends on the cardiac output, amount of oxygen that is dissolved in the blood. So even if your PaO2 is normal, if the patient has got a low cardiac output or if the patient is anemic, oxygen delivery will be low. So all this has to be kept in mind when we initiate oxygen therapy. So if we look at the potential causes, there are different causes of hypoxemia, but if you grossly divide them into reduced FiO2, hypoventilation, VQ mismatches, you can see that some of these have an increase in there is a difference between the alveolar as well as the arterial oxygen gradient. I won't go too much into physiology. And you can see how oxygen therapy will be helpful in some of these conditions, whereas in some conditions, actually, oxygen therapy may not be very helpful. So in this chart, you can see some of the potential causes of hypoxemia and the potential role of oxygen therapy that may be played if applied to this patient. So what do we expect when we start oxygen therapy? What are the physiological effects that we expect? The one thing that we want to happen is reversal of hypoxemia. So if the hypoxemia is due to hypoventilation, or if there is a ventilation perfusion mismatch, this will be, the patient will be responsive to your oxygen therapy. And as we have seen in COVID-19, I haven't dealt with many children with COVID-19, but in the adult patients, what we find is mainly a ventilation perfusion mismatch because of the microthrombi and the ARDS that occurs. That is why we see that these patients respond very well to oxygen therapy. But when we start oxygen therapy, we have to remember that oxygen has its toxicity. There are different toxicities that have been described, so CNS as well as cardiovascular toxicity. And also there is another entity known as absorption atelectasis, which can occur with very high concentrations of oxygen. And there is also chances of oxidative injury. So something similar to ARDS can occur because of the pro-oxidants that are released with very high oxygen delivered. So many conditions you have something known as a permissive hypoxemia. So especially now in COVID-19, for adult patients, we always aim to keep the saturation between 92 and 96%. We don't aim for a saturation above 96%. So this is something that is known as permissive hypoxemia. So we don't aim for very high oxygen saturations. At the same time, we don't try to go below 92%. So when we start oxygen therapy, there is something which is very important that we have to remember, that it is a very dry gas. So it has to be humidified, because unless this is humidified, because normally our nose and the nasal cavity all take part, they all that humidifies the gas that we breathe in. So when that is bypassed, this dry gas can cause ciliary dysfunctions and can cause damage to the squamous epithelium. So humidification is very important when we give oxygen therapy, because now this is very important now, because everybody is talking a lot about mucormycosis and how humidification is causing all that. But actually what we have seen, we have been dealing with hundreds of patients in our ICU, and we've not had any oxygen therapy. So you have to remember that humidification is very important to maintain ciliary function, to prevent squamous epithelial changes, dehydration, thickening of secretions, and preventing heat loss. So you have kid on the block is the high frequency nasal cannulae. So humidification is usually done in our wards. We do it with bubble humidifiers. That is, you have a bubble humidifier which is connected to the oxygen outlet, and you have to be very particular that you use clean water, and this humidifier should be washed and disinfected regularly, and it should be kept tightened so that you avoid any oxygen leaks, and the water level should be checked at least twice daily. And you should always have a extra humidifier, bubble humidifier ready when you change the humidifier, because we've even seen in our ICUs when they change the humidifier, that even those few minutes of removal of oxygen may be detrimental for the patient. So it is always better to make sure that you have a spare humidifier ready when you change your bubble humidifiers. So what are the different sources of oxygen? This is also this has been the hot topic these days. You have the oxygen cylinders from where you have the flow meters. You have the oxygen concentrators where you can give up to 5 liters of almost 96 to 97% of oxygen. Some oxygen concentrators you can give up to 10 liters of oxygen. Then you have the piped systems where you have the wall outlets, which come either from the liquid oxygen or from the cylinder manifolds. And this is what we commonly use in our ICUs, but whereas in the wards, you may be using either the oxygen cylinders or the oxygen concentrators. So from the oxygen sources of the oxygen, you have the oxygen delivery system. So this is the interface between the source and the patient. So you will hear a lot of confusing terms about fixed low flow systems, high flow systems, variable performance systems, fixed performance systems. So this all just basically just depends on one thing, is whether how much of oxygen is being given by that particular device. Because if the device provides only some of the inspired gas, because when you take in gas, if the device is providing only some of the inspired gas, it's a low flow system, and the performance will be variable, because the patient has to draw air from the atmosphere to mix with this oxygen, and so there will be dilution of oxygen. The 100% oxygen that you give is mixed with room air during inspiration. So that is a low flow variable performance system. So that is just what it means. That is, it's a low flow, and this has to be mixed with atmospheric air. And the mixture with atmospheric air depends on the minute ventilation as well as the peak inspiratory flow rate of the patient. I'll just come to that slide, to that part soon. And high flow fixed performance systems are when the system provides all of the patient's inspired gas. So here, all of the inspired gas is given by the system. So you have a stable FiO2. So there is no, it does not depend on the patient's respiration or the patient's tidal minute ventilation or the respiratory rate. So there are two things that you have to remember here. One is the resting minute volume and the peak inspiratory flow rate. So these are the two things which will decide how that particular device performs. So what is the resting minute volume? And this I just put this slide based on an adult, but it is basically the tidal volume into the respiratory rate. So that is the resting minute volume. Attached to the oxygen delivery device, it enables storage of oxygen during the expiratory phase of ventilation. So when you take in gas and during expiration, there is a passive flow of oxygen into the reservoir bag. And this oxygen will be used for the subsequent inspiratory phase. So if the flow rate that is being given into the system is above that of the minute ventilation of the patient, that is the tidal volume into the respiratory rate, you can achieve a concentration of 100%. So you just need to remember that simple basic thing. So you can achieve a concentration of 100% if the flow that you give is above the minute ventilation of the patient. Then the other thing that we always talk about when we talk about oxygen therapy, oxygen delivery devices, is the peak inspiratory flow rate. So normally at rest for an adult, the peak inspiratory flow rate is about 30 liters per minute. So because if you take a breath of about 4 seconds, that is 15 breaths per minute, 1 second will be for inspiration and 3 seconds for expiration. So for each inspiration of 500 ml, you take about 1 second. So that will be equal to a flow rate of 30 liters per minute. So this is at rest. So, but in a sick patient, of course, their peak inspiratory flow will be much higher. So you may have to deliver this flow rate to give extra oxygen to the patient. So I'll just show you this chart, which I hope you'll be able to understand it better. Here you have low flow devices where the flow that is delivered to the patient is below the inspiratory flow rate of the patient. So the flow from the device is below the inspiratory flow rate of the patient. So some amount of gas has to be taken in from the atmosphere because you need this much of flow. You need suppose you need 30 liters of flow. If the flow that is delivered by the device is below that, the rest of the flow has to be taken from the atmosphere. So you have mixing up. So you can see the shaded areas there, and that is where you have dilution of the oxygen. So that is how the low flow device works. Whereas the high flow device, you have the flow that is provided by the device is much higher than the patient's inspiratory flow rate. So everything is provided by the device. And you also have reservoirs where you can a fixed FiO2 can be achieved with this reservoir system, where some amount of gas, as I told you earlier, some amount of gas is brought into the reservoir bag. I'll talk about this in detail a little later. And this can be used as a reserve. So basically, we divide the systems into low flow devices and high flow devices. So the difference is that with the low flow devices, you have a less consistent concentration of inspired oxygen because the delivery of the gas is much less than that of the patient's requirements. But the rest of it is entrained from the atmosphere. So these examples of these are nasal cannulae, simple face masks, tracheostomy collars. And the high flow devices are more reliable concentrations of inspired oxygen is given regardless of the patient's effort. So examples of these are the partial and non-rebreathing masks, nebulizers, high flow nasal cannulae, oxygen hood. non-invasive ventilation and mechanical ventilation. I won't go into the details of non-invasive or mechanical ventilation. That is beyond the scope of this talk. So just a few words about each of these devices. The nasal prongs are two short tapered tubes about 1 centimeter in length, and this just lies just within the nostrils. So because it just lies within the nostrils, this can be fixed there. There is no risk of gastric distension because it is just at the nostrils at standard flow rates. And the natural nasal mechanisms of heat and humidity will be working there. So you don't need to have any additional humidification. The standard flow rates are 0.5 to 1 liter per minute for neonates, 1 to 2 liters for infants, and 1 to 4 liters for older children. If you give flows above that, it can cause drying of mucosa, and it will be difficult for the patient. The advantages of this are this is very low cost. It is easy to fix. The hands are kept free because it can be kept on the nose and it can be just plastered there. And there is not much interference with further airway care because the face is free. If you need to do anything else, that is also the face is free. But it is unstable and it can be easily dislodged. If the child moves, the child is crying, it can get easily dislodged. And if you use very high flows, it is uncomfortable. It can cause drying, nasal trauma, and mucosal irritation. But as we said earlier, since the flow rates are very low, the FiO2 can be inaccurate and inconsistent because if the patient is going to take in rapid breaths, the patient is hyperventilating, there is going to be more entrained atmospheric air. So there will be dilution of the inspired gas. Roughly, if you can go by this formula, that with a normal ventilatory pattern, each liter per minute of nasal oxygen will increase the FiO2 by approximately 4%. The other thing that we use are the nasal catheters, where a catheter is introduced up to just above the uvula. So how you measure the sizes, you take the measurement from the side of the nostril to the inner margin of the eyebrow, and that length of the catheter is introduced. So the catheter tips has got holes, and that catheter is introduced through the nostril. So and the tip should lie just below the uvula. The maximal flow rate here is used as 0.5 to 1 liters for neonate and only 1 to 2 liters per minute for infants and older children. I'm emphasizing more and more on the flow rates now because we are going through situations where oxygen is very scarce and we have multiple patients being on oxygen therapy at the same time. So if we inadvertently use too much of flows, there is always a problem of oxygen pressure dropping and not overuse of oxygen. So that is why I'm trying to emphasize on the maximum flow rate that you should use for these is only 0.5 to 1 liter per minute for neonates and 1 to 2 liters per minute for infants and older children. In addition to nasal catheters, you can also have nasopharyngeal catheters, which is just passed to the nasopharynx just below the uvula. So it goes a little more down. The other one lies just above at the level above the uvula. Here you pass it just below the level of the uvula. Hello? Okay, sir. Okay. Okay, sir. So here the depth is inserted 1 centimeter less than the distance from the side of the nose to the front of the ear. So you take the distance from the side of the nose to the front of the ear and you decrease 1 centimeter and that distance is introduced. Here again, the maximum flow rate is 0.5 liters per minute for neonates and 1 liter per minute for infants. This is very economical. You have better oxygenation. You can get relatively high FiO2s with a significant PEEP. Because here you can see that in infants with a 1 liter per minute of oxygen, you can have a PEEP of up to about 2.8 centimeters of water. So in severe hypoxemia or apnea, this is found to be beneficial because it gives you a little bit more of PEEP. But the problem with this is if it is not fixed properly, the downward displacement into the esophagus can cause gagging, vomiting, and a gastric distension. If it inadvertently goes down, all the oxygen will be going into the stomach. And because it is in the nasopharynx, there is always a chance of it being blocked with mucus. And also, the humidification and warming properties of the nose are bypassed, unlike the nasal catheters and the nasal prongs. So it has to be removed and cleaned at least twice a day, and humidification is always required. So coming to the reservoir masks. So these are depending on the type of mask, they may be either low flow or variable performance. Rebreathing mask and the non-rebreathing mask. So the simple face mask, you have a plastic body which has got side holes on both sides. And you have the oxygen port connected there. And you also have an elastic band to fit the patient's face. So ambient air is entrained through the side holes on the side of the mask, and exhaled gas can be removed through these side holes also. So the side holes are used for entrainment of ambient air as well as for gases to be vented out to the atmosphere. So it depends on the expiratory pause also, because when gas flows from the oxygen source to the mask, during the expiratory pause, the mask is filled with oxygen. So that serves as a reservoir. So if there is no expiratory pause, if the patient is taking very rapid breaths, there is no time for the oxygen to fill up in the, so most of the oxygen may be getting vented out into the atmosphere. So for these, to use a simple face mask, you need to have an adequate expiratory pause where you get time for the oxygen to fill the mask, and that will be acting as a reservoir for your next breath. So during the expiratory pause, fresh oxygen vents the exhaled gas through the side holes, and the body of the mask acts as a reservoir. And this is filled with fresh oxygen, and this will be available for the start of the next inspiration. So this is one thing about the simple face mask. You need to have a normal ventilatory pattern. So, and the final concentration of the inspired oxygen will depend on the oxygen supply flow rate. If you have very high flow rates, of course you can can't give very high flow rates with this mask. And the pattern of the ventilation, as I said earlier, the expiratory pause is important. It's during this expiratory pause that oxygen fills the mask and it is taken in the next breath. And if the patient's inspiratory flow rate is very high, if the patient is going to take very rapid breaths or is going to hyperventilate, again, there'll be more gas. So that means that the flow that is delivered from the source is much less than the patient's inspiratory flow rate. So that has to be compensated by taking in more gas from the atmosphere. So there will be more dilution. And it also depends on how tight the mask fits on the face. So if we look at this, you can see that with a simple face mask, you can have an adequate or a good FiO2 delivered if the patient's inspiratory flow rate is less, if the patient has got a low respiratory rate, if you have a high fresh oxygen flow rate, and a good fitting mask. So if all these factors are there, you will have a good FiO2 delivered. Whereas if the patient's peak inspiratory flow rate is very high, the patient is very dyspneic, if the patient is very tachypneic, work of breathing is very high, if the patient's requirements are much more, then there will be more air entrainment and the FiO2 that is delivered will be less. That is why this is a variable performance device. It is not a fixed performance device, it's a variable performance device because it depends on the inspiratory flow rate of the patient. If the patient is taking a very rapid rate, that means again, the minute ventilation is more, the peak inspiratory flow rate is more. So here again, the FiO2 that will be delivered will be low. If the fresh oxygen flow is less, again, FiO2 will be low. And if the mask is not fitting properly, there's going to be a lot of leak. So again, the FiO2 delivered will be low. So if you add a 600 to 8 ml bag to the mask, this will act as an extra reservoir. So gas can get filled in this reservoir and this can be used for the next breath. So a simple face mask can be converted into something which is more efficient by adding a reservoir bag to the mask. So these are either partial rebreathing masks or non-rebreathing masks, depending on whether there is a valve or not. So in a partial rebreathing mask, there are no valves. And how this acts is that during exhalation, the oxygen from there are no valves here. So oxygen that is there inside the reservoir bag, plus the first 1/3 of the exhaled gas, that is the anatomic dead space gas, enters the bag. So this all comes into the bag. So whatever is there from the source, that is the oxygen, plus the first 1/3, that is the anatomical dead space gas, enters the bag, and this remains there in the bag for your next breath. And the rest 2/3 of the exhaled gas is vented out into the atmosphere through the side ports. And during your inspiration, the first 1/3 exhaled gas plus the oxygen is inhaled. So you have about 60 to 80% of oxygen will be there in your next breath. Here, your fresh gas flow should be more than 8 liters per minute, and the bag should remain inflated to ensure that the highest FiO2 is given, and to prevent rebreathing. When we talk about rebreathing, is that there should be no carbon dioxide in your next breath. That is what we mean by rebreathing. When you say rebreathing, you mean that there should be no carbon dioxide in the next breath that you take. So the difference between the partial rebreathing mask and the non-rebreathing mask is that here in the non-rebreathing mask, you have 3 unidirectional valves. That is, on the mask, you have 2 expiratory valves, and on the at the source, at the oxygen source, between the bag, between the reservoir bag and the mask, you have an inspiratory valve. Sorry. So this expiratory valve will prevent air entrainment. So because this expiratory valve closes during inspiration, there will not be any air entrainment. So whatever gas the patient is breathing in is what is there from the reservoir bag. There is no air entrained from outside. So whatever is there in the reservoir bag is what is going to the patient. So you can get a very high FiO2 of about 0.8 to 0.9. That is if you keep a fresh gas flow of 10 to 15 liters. And this inspiratory valve will prevent the exhaled gas from blowing into the reservoir bag. So during expiration, the gas does not flow into the inspiratory valve, into the reservoir bag. So what happens is you have all the fresh gas from the oxygen coming into the reservoir bag, and that is taken in by the patient. So I hope you understood the difference between the non-rebreathing mask and the partial rebreathing mask. Basically, the non-rebreathing mask, you have 3 unidirectional valves, whereas in the partial rebreathing mask, you do not have valves. That's just the basic difference. And with a non-rebreathing mask, you can give higher FiO2s. You have to keep a higher fresh gas flow of 10 to 50 liters per minute. This is just the basic concept that you need to remember. Then you have the high flow system. So what we were talking about earlier about the low flow systems or the medium flow systems. So the partial rebreathing mask and the non-rebreathing mask can be taken more of as medium flow systems, but you have the high flow systems where you have very high flows delivered to the patient. That is, the flow equals the patient's peak inspiratory flow. So as I mentioned earlier, the peak inspiratory flow for an adult is about, in a normal resting adult, is about 30 liters per minute. So the flow that is given to the patient is equal to the peak inspiratory flow of the patient. So here you either have air entrainment or blending systems. You have 2 different systems, either air entrainment, which is used for the Venturi Mask, or blending systems, which are nasal cannula. I will come just quickly tell you about those 2 systems. So when the air entrainment devices, this works on the Bernoulli principle, where a rapid velocity of gas exiting from when gas is rapidly goes through a restricted orifice, it causes a lateral subatmospheric pressure. The subatmospheric, there are subatmospheric lateral pressures, and this results in indrawing of air from the atmosphere. So the Venturi mask works on this principle. Here again, you have a plastic body of the mask with holes on the sides, and the proximal end of the mask, you have a Venturi device. So it's just like a simple face mask, but at the portion where the oxygen is connected, you have this thing called a Venturi device connected there. And so these are color coded, and it is marked with the recommended oxygen flow rate. So these are color coded, and on this you have the markings. So that will tell you about how many liters of oxygen you have to put to get this percentage of oxygen. If you look at how this works, you can see that these are two different Venturi devices. This green one provides a 60% oxygen, and the blue one provides 24% oxygen. So you can see the aperture here. In the green Venturi device, you have a larger aperture, so you have more oxygen going. Whereas in the blue one, you have a very small aperture. So that is the aperture for oxygen to flow. But you can also see that the lateral apertures, when you have the bigger aperture for oxygen and smaller apertures for air entrainment. So you will have less entrained atmospheric air and more of oxygen. So you can get about 60% of oxygen. Whereas you can see in the blue device, the aperture is very small, and the aperture for air entrainment is much larger. So you have more air entrained, so there'll be more air dilution, and you will have a lower concentration of oxygen. So this is how this system works. So you have the aperture for oxygen, and you have these lateral apertures where air is entrained. And the size varies for each of these Venturi devices. So these are we can't remember all these, but you can always have these charts available in your ICUs or in your HDUs. So you know how much of FiO2 will be given with so much of oxygen flow, and the total amount of gas that is going to go into the patient. It will be worthwhile having these charts if you're using these Venturi devices. Then the other new kit in the block, as I told you earlier, is the high flow nasal cannula, which we have been using a lot now, especially in this COVID season, where you have a air oxygen blender. So you have a flow meter along with the this device, and that along with it, that delivers oxygen. Along with that, air is taken from the atmosphere, and this is blended in the system itself. So the patient does not have to do anything. The air and oxygen is blended in the system itself. So you have a fixed FiO2 which is given to the patient. And in addition to that, you have an active humidifier. So this humidifier is very important because you can give higher flows to this patient because the gas that you're giving is humidified. You can also give warmed gases. About in the HFNC machines that we have, we warm the gas between 34 to 37 degrees Celsius. So you can give heated, humidified, high flow gases to the patient. So you have a higher oxygen flow, which is more than the demand flow of the patient, depending on the clinical situation. So this is very, especially now in our COVID scenarios, this is very useful because the requirements of the patient are more, the inspiratory demand of the patient is more. So you can give this high flow to the patient with a higher oxygen concentration. And because you're giving heated, humidified gases, mucosal injury is avoided, and there is better clearance of secretions, washout of the upper airways, decreased nasal resistance, and a reduced dead space. Because of all this, you have a reduced work of breathing, improved oxygenation, and ventilatory efficiency. So this is a table which shows the recommended flow settings for the cannulae in pediatric practice. Then the other devices which are used are the oxygen tent, where you have a canopy placed over the head of the patient. This is a variable performance device. The disadvantage is it's expensive, cumbersome, difficult to clean, and it limits patient mobility. You have the oxygen hood, which covers only the head of the infant. Oxygen is delivered either through an intravenous nebulizer or through a blended system. It's again a fixed performance device, and you need a minimum flow of at least 7 liters per minute. And the incubator, which is again a variable performance device. So in addition, you also need to give you may need to give a positive airway pressure to decrease atelectasis and respiratory fatigue, which will thus improve oxygenation. This is indicated in infants with severe respiratory distress, hypoxemia or apnea despite receiving oxygen. So you have the bubble Cpap, where you have the expiratory limb is submerged in water to generate an N-positive pressure, and the pressure is adjusted by altering the depth of the tube under the water. And these are other modifications which can be used in our wards, where you have nasal prongs. The expiratory one end of it is cut and it can be clamped, and the other end can be put into dipped in water, and that can act as a Cpap. And in the other picture, you can see how an oxygenator also can be used as a Cpap machine. But with all these different oxygen delivery devices, you can have complications. One is hypercapnia. If you're using head boxes and face masks where you don't have, when you're giving inadequate flow. So that is why it is important to know how much of flow you should give with each device, because otherwise there is a risk of hypercapnia. Dislodgement can occur, especially with nasal prongs and catheters. Upper airway obstruction, especially if you're not using humidified devices, there can be nasal crusting, mucosal mucus secretions there, and that can cause upper airway obstruction, nasal bleeding. And if you're using inappropriately high, you can have uncontrolled high peeps, and gastric distension or pneumothorax can occur. Especially now, I've not spoken about non-invasive ventilators, but with the use of non-invasive ventilators also, especially in this scenario, we are seeing a lot of patients developing pneumothorax and pneumomediastinum. And of course, the gold standard for oxygen therapy is, if you want to give a FiO2 of 1, regardless of the patient's effort, is of course mechanical ventilation, but the discussion is beyond the scope of this lecture. Hyperbaric oxygen is also used in certain situations where you give 100% oxygen at more than 1 atmospheric pressure. This is used for carbon dioxide poisoning, wound healing, and gas gangrene and air emboli. Then the most important thing to remember is how much oxygen is safe. So a rule of thumb is don't give more than 100% oxygen for more than 12 hours, 80% for more than 24 hours, and 60% for more than 36 hours. The goal should be to use the lowest possible FiO2 compatible with adequate tissue oxygen. This is something I want to emphasize again and again. This is something which we keep saying in our ICUs also. Use the lowest possible FiO2 for that particular patient for adequate tissue oxygenation. And we have to monitor these patients closely. And if there is no response, you have to think of other things which you may have missed. And once the patient is clinically stable, you can stop your therapy. And the most important vital sign, of course, is the SpO2. And as we all know, the most important element that we gasped for in the last 1 month has been oxygen. So again, I want to emphasize this point. Titrate the oxygen that you give to a measured endpoint. Avoid excessive or inadequate dosing. It should be optimized. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Can you stop sharing, madam?
Yes, sir.
So it's really very interesting practical aspects of the oxygen therapy, especially in children. We have some questions are there, madam. Before that, I will start 2-3 questions, madam. Madam, what is permissive hypoxia you mentioned, but a different disease got different level, something like that. Permissive hypoxia.
Yeah, I'm not, to be frank, I'm not very sure about how much permissive hypoxemia is advised in children, but I was reading some articles, especially when in bronchiolitis, I think they say that you don't need to go above 90% or 92%, especially in the in adults. What we say now is, don't aim for anything more than 96%. Your aim should be between 92 and 96%. Then of course it differs in different diseases, and so you have to know what it is for each disease. Sometimes even in adults, with patients with COPD, we say you can go as low as even 88%. So I'm sorry, I'm not that well versed in children.
Previously, we used to treat pneumothorax. We used to give high oxygen. What is the principle, madam? Pneumothorax.
Yeah, that they do say that it causes some amount of absorption, but it would be better to put an ICD if you have a pneumothorax rather than giving 100% oxygen, because 100% oxygen has its deleterious effects. So sometimes we especially now when we are giving 100% oxygen to these patients for days on end in the ICUs, we don't really know whether the patient is worsening because of our oxygen or whether the patient is worsening because of the COVID.
You mentioned about that the blue mask, Venturi Mask, 24% delivery. Atmosphere oxygen under 21% oxygen. Then I misunderstand. I'm not clear. I understand. Blue mask will provide 24% oxygen. Atmospheric oxygen under 21% oxygen.
Yeah, so that is just giving a very little amount. That is the smallest size. So thing is, when you have atmospheric oxygen, that is 21%. The thing about this Venti mask is it's a fixed delivery. So that is the air is entrained, and how do I explain it? If you're using a face mask, depending on the patient's tidal volume and the patient's inspiratory flow, with every breath, the amount of gas that is taken in will vary. So if the patient is going to take a normal breath now, it may be the patient may be taking 21% or 24% or 28%, depending on the tidal volume. But if you're using a Venturi device, every breath that the patient takes will be 24%. So that is the difference there. So if you're using a simple face mask and you're giving 1 liter, that's for every 1 liter you have additional 4%. So if you're giving 1 liter, you're giving an additional 4%. If you're using a Venti mask, if you're using a Venturi device, every breath that the patient takes will be 24%. So I mean, we don't generally need such low flows. Yes, sir.
Okay, madam. Srijit, can you read some questions? Srijit, chat box question.
Sir.
Chat box.
Yes. About the question about using distilled water or boiled water for in a humidifier. What kind of water should be used in humidifier?
What we use is boiled and cooled water is effective. That's what we use. We use boiled and cooled water. So basically, it should be clean water. So you can use distilled water or you can use boiled and cooled water. I'm not very sure about because, to be frank, we have not seen any cases of mucormycosis in our ICUs with the humidifiers that we have, and I don't think in our medical college we have any patients related to COVID having mucormycosis, because now that is the hot topic these days about the bubble humidifier and the type of water that you use.
Distilled water, we are using distilled water, no?
Yeah, the thing about getting distilled water, when you have a ward with at one point we had 500 patients in our ward, most of them needing oxygen. it may not be practical always to have distilled water, but boiled and cooled, clean water is what is more, that is the important thing there.
One question, can mild sedation or proning improve hypoxia? Proning position or mild sedation will improve?
I'm not sure about how you can give sedation in children, but in adults, definitely, if the patient is very anxious, or that may be one reason why the patient may be tachypneic. Because actually, we had a very young child. I mean, one of the youngest patient we had in the ICU was a 17-year-old child, and actually that child came with very rapid respiratory rate and hypoxic. But actually, the child was very anxious because the child was diagnosed to have COVID and the child was in the ward. And of course, you're hearing so many horror stories. So we just a little bit of sedation, and with just a simple face mask, the child improved and we were able to shift out of the ICU. So definitely you can give sedation. But of course, it depends on the condition of the patient, because the type of children that you see will be different from what we see as adults. So it depends on the condition of the child and what the clinical presentation is.
Another question, I don't know why we start oxygen at a higher SpO2 level compared to that when oxygen is stopped.
I didn't get the question, sir.
Why we, Nisha, you are there, Nisha? Nisha, can you ask why we start oxygen at a higher SpO2 level compared to that when oxygen is stopped?
Actually, we are recommending oxygen when the SpO2 level is falling below 94. But for stopping, we are recommending a higher SpO2 levels. So that's why.
Stopping your I didn't get the question.
Is stable over 99 to we are considering stopping, early stopping. We are tapering of the oxygen.
Yeah, so you're saying that if the child comes with a saturation of less than 92, we start the child on oxygen.
94.
So, another question, how do we know whether carbon dioxide trapping doesn't occur with the flow rate we are giving in simple mask and oxygen hood?
Yeah, so that is why you need to know the flows that you have to give with each oxygen delivery device. So that is why I was trying to emphasize on how much of flow you should give with each oxygen delivery device. With a simple mask, you have to give at least 6 liters of oxygen. If your flow is below 6 liters of oxygen with a simple face mask, there is a chance of carbon dioxide accumulation there. If you're using non-rebreathing masks, you have to give 10 to 15 liters of oxygen. So otherwise, there is a chance of carbon dioxide. So that is why you have oxygen. I mean, you have set flows that are prescribed for oxygen. And I think the question Dr. Nisha asked was, I think, I don't know if this will answer you, but when a child comes sick, so we are going by the clinical signs, and you have a disease process occurring. So it's not, so we are not giving oxygen just to give oxygen. We are giving oxygen because there is a disease process there. And in addition to the oxygen, you have other modalities of treatment going on. And so once the disease process has been treated and the patient has started to recover, I think we can slowly taper off oxygen. I hope that answers your question. Because I'm not very sure about what exactly you mean, but I think it is basically we are treating the disease process. We are not giving oxygen for the sake of giving oxygen. We're giving oxygen because the child has got hypoxia due to some particular reason. It may be a bronchiolitis, it may be COVID, it may be a pneumonia, it may be so that disease process is there, and that disease process is being treated with your antibiotics or whatever. And so once that disease process has been managed, of course, you can slowly taper. The child will be able to maintain their saturation or maintain the tissue delivery of oxygen, because their cardiac output is there, the hemoglobin will be better. I mean, it is not just the saturation or the PaO2 that, as I told you earlier, the cardiac output, the hemoglobin, there are so many factors on which tissue oxygen delivery is dependent. I hope that answers your question.
And thank you.
Any other questions? Any other? Our state president is here because he couldn't address us because he had to attend another meeting. Jayaraman sir? Okay, Jayaraman.
Okay, I'm here. So anyhow, thank you for arranging this wonderful CME, and I thank the environment chapter for taking up a very important issue, the contemporary issue of oxygen therapy in children. Thank you so much for giving an opportunity to learn a little more in detail about oxygen therapy. Thank you so much.
Okay, it was a wonderful session, madam. It was a really very practical talk with the various aspects of oxygen treatment, indication, complications. And still, I think whether we are monitoring oxygen therapy very in a right way, because we are not writing. We used to write there, I mean, say how many liters per, but how many hours. I mean, every time it will change. We are not at a drug. We are not properly feeling something like that. Parvati madam, can you say something? Parvati madam. VK Parvati madam is there. Elizabeth.
No, I don't personally know her. Excellent talk, Elizabeth. Excellent talk. And regarding the preservation of ecosystem, every person has to play his or her own part, because we at our house we have got the solar system for electricity, for waste disposal, biogas plant, and we make our own vegetables and rice also. We have rice, coconut oil, everything. We buy only pulses and other things, and we look after all the creatures, not only our own things, but we have to allow all the creatures to survive. Birds, butterflies, we have them in plenty in our place. No problem, no. All trees, not one tree for 10 persons, so many trees for 2 persons. So thank you. It was a wonderful program.
That is true, madam. We can now see more the voices of birds and everything, butterflies. In this COVID season, we can see so many things are there. So as madam mentioned, madam will get more oxygen from your water. Parmesh, any comments? Thank you for sitting with us, Parmesh.
Mute, sir.
Unmute, sir. Unmute. Unmute, sir. Unmute. Unmute.
Yes. I would congratulate Elizabeth Joseph. You are my teacher now. You reminded me all the things during my pulmonary fellowship in USA. I went through 2 weeks. We have to go through anesthesiologist. And I learned all these things, how to communicate and all the wonderful way, the way described and all this thing. Only thing is the question about happy hypoxia that's causing hell of a problem, confusion in the people. I don't know how we could be able to answer it. That one. And also regarding environmental issue, on this day, they mentioned 3 things we have to follow. Number 1, have the carbon dioxide footprint today. Don't use your car today, and make sure you don't have indoor air pollution today. These 3 things you have to follow this day. That's what mentioned about it. I think I have not gone anywhere today. I'm sitting here only. So anyway, this one, happy hypoxia, if you can comment on that, I'll be thankful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say. Yeah, so what they say about hypoxia is it's because the the angiotensin receptors are those are affected by the COVID virus. So generally, you have an increased work of breathing because of the response to carbon dioxide. Your carbon dioxide receptors are stimulated when your oxygen pressure levels drop. So these receptors are stimulated and you have a increased work of breathing. But because the COVID affects these particular receptors, these receptors are not stimulated. So that is why the patients do not have an increased work of breathing. So that is why they don't realize that the oxygen levels have fallen down. So that the response is blunted. The response to hypoxia is blunted in these patients. So that is why they don't respond to this decrease in the oxygen levels. So that is actually something, especially in the second wave, we are seeing a lot of young patients. They become very sick before they start. They have an increased work of breathing. So that is something which is actually very worrying.
Early stages, we'll miss them early stages.
We miss them in the early stages.
Dr. Muleedran, head of the Department of Pediatrics from Palakkad Medical College.
Dr. Anandakeshan, that's a wonderful session, especially on this environmental day. And nowadays, what I see is that because of we people are not going outside and pollution is less, and children are not, so many children are not affected with any respiratory infection. Children are saved from respiratory infection because of lockdown. That's a better effect, isn't it, Dr. Paramesh? Don't you feel?
I 100% agree with you. 100% agree with you. Definitely.
So we have to continue lockdown with some limitation or some restriction.
Restrictions. I think
regarding environment concerned, because so many people are suffering also. That's another way.
Definitely. Other pneumonia cases, bronchial cases, other flu infections, tuberculosis, death, mortality, hardly you see. I think recently Papadopoulos has just sent it about last week from European Academy of Immunology. He said there is 60% reduction of the asthmatics coming to the emergency department.
Correct.
Nearly 40% reduction in the medications, as a matter of fact. And asthma, the COVID infection is almost 30% less in them.
Diarrhea also, madam, due to food, they are not taking food from outside. Not only respiratory, non-respiratory condition, diarrhea.
And the distancing and all the thing, hygiene, these things contribute significantly. That's what he said. These are all the three things contributing. These things, I think I do agree with him, Papadopoulos.
So thank you to all the dignitaries, Dr. Jayaprasad, Dr. Sukumaran, Parmesh, and all other national and state leaders, and also both speakers, Mohammed Punji sir and Elizabeth madam. Now I once again invite Dr. Sijit Kumar to conclude the session.
Elizabeth, a good teacher. Congratulations. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
I think the Parmesh sir's wife's name also Elizabeth.
Yes.
So with that talk, we are come to an end to today's program of World Environmental Day Observation. But with the spirit and idea of environmental conservation will surely carry from now onwards, at least. So we have exciting good talks today. We have Dr. Elizabeth Joseph Madam and Mohammed Punji sir. And thank you, Elizabeth Madam and Punji sir, for the talk. And also thank Anandakeshan sir for moderating this session absolutely well. And also thank all the senior members of Academy, Dr. Muleedran sir, Parvati Madam, and Paramesh sir for sitting us through the session, even though it's a long session. Thank you for joining with us. And to all of you, we have another program coming on the Tuesday, our regular monthly program. And so hope you to join on 8th Tuesday at 8 p.m. Till then, good night from